In the cutthroat world of sports management, it's hard to find someone who isn't in it just for the money. Meet Eugene Lee. He left a steady paycheck at a law firm in New York City for the competitive world of the NFL. Eugene is known as the powerhouse agent who conducts business the same way he lives his life, with faith and integrity. In his book, My Brother's Keeper, Eugene gives us a look at the business side of football and why he offers his clients something above and beyond the dotted line.
Eugene Lee, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andrew.
We're excited for you. Baby coming, your first one in a few weeks, right?
Yes, exactly.
Congratulations,
Thank
little
you very
boy,
much.
right?
Exactly. Lucas.
All right, we're very happy for you.
Thank
so you leave a nice, I assume, a pretty comfortable job in New York as an attorney. Give it all up. I love in your book you say it was like burning the ships, as the Spanish used to do when they conquered a new land. There's no turning back. You gave it up for this, to be an agent. What made you do that?
I represented my first players on the side while I was practicing law in the city, having met them at Notre Dame while I was playing pickup basketball. First 4 years, it was a perfect storm, so to speak, in terms of cultivating the experience, the skill set that I needed to excel on their behalf. And as I was doing the work, I realized that I had an aptitude for it, but more importantly, I loved it. Working with young men from my alma mater, young men of character, to maximize their platform, to do great things.
I was impressed in your book how much you vet players, that you do a lot of research on potential clients before even approaching them. Is that common in the industry?
It's not as common as it should be. The industry we're in, the reality we are in right now is that you front your training expenses, you front pre-draft expenses for your players, and then you make your revenues on the back end. When they get drafted, they make teams, they earn commissions. So you really can't afford to miss on players and signing players and investing in players that don't make it.
This isn't just a career in which you're sitting in a nice office making million-dollar deals. I mean, you're in hotels a lot. You're running around in bad weather trying to stop 8 other, NFL reps in the airport and all these things. I mean, this is a stressful job you have.
It really is, and it's in times of stress and on the road, especially when you're faced with obstacles, that you really lean into your faith. And that's been my foundation, and it's been strengthened in me and reaffirmed in me in the work that I do for my clients.
And your players know your faith is important to you?
Absolutely. When we vet out and recruit players, it's not like that's a prerequisite, but oftentimes that's how it plays out in terms of finding young men that share the consistent values, have the Lord in their hearts, and understand that there's a greater meaning to life on this earth.
I would think you're one of the few agents who prays with his players.
Great story. Last year before the Combine, one of our clients, Sean Davis, his father, wonderful family, Christian family, his dad, before his workout on the final day of the Combine when the defensive backs worked out, he asked me, I want you to sit down in the lobby of the hotel before you drop my son off and pray with my son tonight. And so we did. In the lobby of the Players Hotel at the Crown Plaza in Indianapolis, we prayed. And by the grace of God, he was blessed to have a phenomenal workout the next day. Probably it was Sean and Jalen Ramsey, the top workouts at the Combine for defensive backs.
That's a special privilege, and that's an action on your part that other players will talk about, right?
Absolutely, and I'm not afraid of sharing my faith. I think a lot of times my work in the industry is to lead these young men to Christ and to really show them the way and to be my brother's keeper in a cutthroat industry.
And these players really expect, and I would think demand, that you go to bat for them. You go to the mat for them, you do the extreme in order to represent them well. Is that ever a challenge?
No, it's not, and I think that part of the reason why I'm doing what I do is to show people that, oftentimes there's a misnomer, there's a misconnotation that as a Christian you have to be meek, you have to be mild-mannered, you have to be a pushover, essentially. And I respect Tim Tebow because Tim has come out and you've seen his work on the field and now on the baseball field, that you can be a strong man, you can be a man of power, of purpose. You don't have to live lives of timidity, which we were never meant to lead. And I feel like I'm called to do the same on the agent side.
So are you able to negotiate with NFL teams and GMs in a fairly tough manner while still representing Christ?
Absolutely, and that's the best part about it, is that...
You look like you enjoy it.
I do. It's a way of witnessing to people that are bottom line people for the most part in a cutthroat industry, to let them know that you can handle your business with Christian values, yet you can still excel, you can be tenacious, and you can get the best deal for your client. They are not mutually exclusive, they go hand in hand.
So what's the hardest part about your job?
The hardest part about my job is having to deliver news, unpleasant news, in unpleasant occasions with dignity and grace. We've had clients cut by a couple NFL teams on Christmas Eve, where I had to let one client know that he was let go by his team after he flew his mother up from Florida to spend the holidays with him. And so that is not as easy as, it doesn't sound easy at all, and it was harder to deliver. But by the grace of God, I was able to deliver it with compassion and dignity and grace.
What about the bad news you receive sometimes? You'll maybe recruit a potential client, a player hard, and they go with somebody else. How do you handle it?
Your faith. It's about trust, understanding that in this world, I can see only a mile down the road, but the Lord knows, and he can see down the road toward eternity. And in times like that, that's all you have, but that's all you need is trust, because as I say in the book, where you expect him the least is where you find him the most. You lean into God in those times. With such an important job, and the fact that your decisions, your strategies affect players, teams, fans, etc., do you ever feel like you have your priorities out of whack a little bit? You know, I do. And actually, it was even last night, having the privilege of coming down here to appear on the show. I was catching up on work last night, and my mother and my wife, yeah,
sometimes
exactly.
It's not a very popular thing to say.
No, especially if your wife's around. But my wife caught me in check, which she often does, and she said, "Look, you need to prioritize, especially with the baby on the way, that it is God, family, and your career." And that's the way it should always be. And sometimes, you know, I do fall out of priority, but that's the importance of staying in the Word and staying in prayer daily just to get yourself back on track.
Amen. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it. It's a great book. You can hear more of his stories by getting the book. It's called My Brother's Keeper, and it's available nationwide.